What if the life you're living right now is just a fraction of who you could become? And deep down, you already know it. What if the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't talent, luck, or timing, but the standards you tolerate every single day? Think about that. Because most people don't fail from lack of ability. They fail because they never force themselves to grow when it's uncomfortable. You wake up with ideas. You feel that quiet voice telling you to do more, be more, push harder. But then comfort steps in. You scroll a little longer. You delay a little more. You tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow. And tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. And suddenly you're stuck in a life that feels average, even though you were never meant to be average. Here's the truth: improvement is not natural. Growth is not automatic. You don't drift into becoming better. You drift into becoming comfortable. And comfort is dangerous because it feels safe while it quietly destroys your potential. If you want to change your life, you have to force yourself to improve. Not when you feel like it, not when motivation shows up, but especially when you don't feel like it. Because the difference between winners and everyone else is simple. They act even when it's hard. They show up even when it's inconvenient. They push forward even when there's no immediate reward. Imagine this. Two people have the same dream, same starting point, same opportunity. One decides to act only when they feel ready. The other decides to act no matter what. A year later, their lives look completely different. Not because one was smarter, but because one was disciplined. You don't need more inspiration. You need more discipline. You don't need the perfect plan. You need the courage to take imperfect action. Forcing yourself to improve means doing the things you avoid. It means facing the discomfort you keep running from. It means choosing growth over excuses every single time. And yes, it's hard, it's supposed to be. Because if it were easy, everyone would be extraordinary. But they're not. So the question is, will you keep waiting until you feel ready? Or will you decide right now to become the person who takes control and forces change, no matter what? Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. Waiting until you feel ready is the fastest way to stay exactly where you are. Readiness is a myth. Confidence is a result, not a requirement. And if you keep telling yourself, I just need a little more time, what you're really saying is, I'm afraid to start. Because starting forces you to confront something uncomfortable. It forces you to see where you're weak. And we don't like that. We like the idea of improvement. We like imagining a better version of ourselves. But the reality of improvement, that's messy. That's frustrating. That's showing up and not being as good as you hoped. That's trying and failing again and again with no guarantee of immediate success. But here's the shift that changes everything. Growth is supposed to feel uncomfortable. Think about the last time you truly improved at something. Not stayed the same. Not played it safe. Actually improved. It probably didn't feel easy. It probably felt slow, maybe even painful. That's because improvement requires stretching beyond what's familiar. And most people avoid that stretch. They stay in environments where they feel competent. They repeat the same habits because they're predictable. They protect their ego instead of challenging it. And over time, that comfort becomes a cage. You don't notice it at first. It feels like stability. It feels like control. But eventually you realize you're not growing anymore. You're just existing. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine you make a decision that from this moment forward, you will no longer negotiate with your excuses. That when something feels hard, you lean into it instead of pulling away. That when you fail, you don't retreat, you adjust. Because forcing yourself to improve is not about being perfect. It's about being relentless. It's about saying, I may not be good at this yet, but I will be. Every expert you admire was once a beginner who refused to quit. Every confident person you look up to was once uncertain. The difference is they didn't wait for confidence. They built it through action. And here's what starts to happen when you adopt that mindset. At first, it feels unnatural. You have to push yourself constantly. You have to remind yourself why you started. But over time, something shifts. The things that once felt difficult become normal. The discipline that once felt forced becomes part of who you are. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And you start saying, this is who I am now. That's the moment everything changes. Because when improvement becomes your identity, not just your goal, you don't go back to your old life. You outgrow it. There's a moment that defines everything, and most people miss it. It's not the big opportunities. It's not the life-changing events. It's the small, quiet moments when you have a choice. A choice to act or a choice to avoid. That moment when the alarm goes off and your body says, stay in bed. That moment when you know what needs to be done, but you feel resistance. That moment when no one is watching, and it would be so easy to take the easier path. That's where your future is decided, not in what you say you want, not in your intentions, but in what you do in those moments. Because forcing yourself to improve isn't about huge leaps, it's about winning those small decisions over and over again. Here's what most people don't realize. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're training yourself to stay the same. You're reinforcing a pattern. You're telling your mind, this is acceptable, and your mind listens. But the opposite is also true. Every time you push yourself, even in the smallest way, you're building a new standard. You're telling yourself, I don't quit when it's hard. I don't avoid what matters. And that changes everything. Think about someone who is physically strong. They didn't become that way overnight. It was repetition. Consistency, showing up when it was inconvenient. Lifting when it was uncomfortable. The same principle applies to your mindset. You build mental strength the same way. You train it. And training means resistance. It means doing the work when you don't feel like it. It means focusing when your mind wants to wander. It means continuing when progress feels slow. Because here's the truth, your feelings are unreliable. Some days you'll feel motivated. Most days you won't. If your actions depend on how you feel, your results will always be inconsistent. But if your actions are based on discipline, everything changes. Discipline is not about being harsh on yourself. It's about being committed to who you're becoming. It's about understanding that short-term discomfort leads to long-term growth. And when you start operating from that place, something powerful happens. You stop seeing hard things as obstacles. You start seeing them as opportunities. Opportunities to prove to yourself that you can do more, that you can be more, that you are not limited by your current habits. Because every time you choose growth over comfort, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. And those votes add up day by day, decision by decision, until one day you look at your life and you don't even recognize the person you used to be. Not because of one big change, but because you stopped avoiding the small ones. Let's go deeper, because this is where most people break. It's easy to talk about discipline when you're motivated. It's easy to push yourself when everything is going right. But what about the days when nothing works? When you try and fail? When you give effort and see no results? When it feels like you're doing everything right and still not moving forward? That's the moment that separates people. Because forcing yourself to improve is not tested when it's easy. It's tested when it feels pointless. When your progress is invisible. When nobody notices your effort. When the only thing you have is your own belief, and even that starts to shake. This is where most people quit. Not because they're incapable, but because they're tired of not seeing immediate rewards. They expect growth to be fast. They expect results to confirm their effort. And when that doesn't happen, they start questioning everything. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should just stop. But what if the problem isn't your ability? What if the problem is your expectation of how growth works? Because real growth is not linear. It doesn't show up every day. It doesn't reward you instantly. In fact, most of the time, it feels like nothing is happening at all. You put in the work, you show up, you push yourself. And the results, they're delayed. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Every time you keep going despite not seeing progress, you're building something far more powerful than skill. You're building resilience. You're teaching yourself that your effort is not dependent on immediate results, that your commitment is stronger than your doubt. And that's rare, because most people need evidence to continue. They need validation. They need proof that what they're doing is working. But the people who truly improve, they don't wait for proof. They become the proof. They trust the process before the results appear. Imagine planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You water it. You give it time. You trust that something is happening even when you can't see it. Your growth works the same way. If you keep interrupting the process with doubt, impatience, and inconsistency, you never give yourself the chance to develop. But if you stay consistent, if you keep forcing yourself to show up, even when it feels like nothing is changing, you reach a point where everything clicks. And suddenly, the results that once felt impossible start becoming real. Not because it happened overnight, but because you refused to quit during the phase when nothing was visible. That's the phase that defines you. And if you can push through that, there's nothing you can't become. Now here's where it gets even more real. Because at some point, the biggest obstacle won't be the work, it will be you. Your thoughts, your doubts. The voice in your head that tells you to slow down, to stop, to settle. That voice is powerful. It knows your fears. It knows your insecurities. It knows exactly how to convince you to stay where you are. And the dangerous part is, it doesn't sound like an enemy. It sounds like you. Take a break. You deserve it. This is too hard. Maybe it's not worth it. You've already done enough for today. And sometimes those things sound reasonable. But if you're honest, you know the difference between rest and avoidance. You know when you're recovering, when you're hiding. Because forcing yourself to improve requires one thing above everything else, self-awareness. You have to be able to catch yourself in those moments. To pause and ask, is this helping me grow? Or is this keeping me comfortable? Most people never ask that question. They follow their emotions blindly. They react instead of choosing. And over time, they become controlled by habits they didn't even consciously create. But the moment you become aware, you take back control. You start noticing patterns. You start recognizing when you're making excuses. You start seeing the gap between who you are and who you could be. And that gap can be uncomfortable. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You realize that the only thing standing between you and growth is your willingness to act despite how you feel. That's a hard truth, because it removes the illusion that something external is holding you back. It puts the responsibility back on you. But at the same time, it gives you power. Because if you are the reason you're stuck, you can also be the reason you move forward. Think about that. You don't need to wait for the perfect situation. You don't need someone to come and push you. You don't need everything to align, you just need to decide. Decide that your future matters more than your current comfort. Decide that your goals are worth the discomfort. Decide that you will no longer let temporary emotions control permanent outcomes. And once you make that decision, something shifts. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop looking for the easy way out. You start holding yourself to a higher standard, not because someone is forcing you, but because you are finally choosing to become someone who refuses to stay the same. And that choice, made consistently, is what transforms everything. At some point, you have to stop asking, what do I feel like doing? And start asking, what does the person I want to become do right now? Because that's the real shift. Most people live their lives based on their current identity. They act according to who they believe they are today. If they see themselves as inconsistent, they act inconsistently. If they see themselves as average, they accept average behavior. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But the people who truly improve, they flip that completely. They don't act based on who they are. They act based on who they are becoming, even when it feels unnatural. Even when it feels forced, that's the point. Because forcing yourself to improve means stepping into an identity that hasn't fully formed yet. It means behaving like someone stronger, more disciplined, more focused before you fully believe you are that person. And yes, it feels uncomfortable at first. It feels like you're pretending. It feels like you're out of place. It feels like you're pushing against your own nature. But what you're actually doing is rewiring your standards. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're reinforcing a new identity. Every time you follow through on something you said you'd do, you're building trust with yourself. And that trust is everything. Because right now, if you're honest, there are promises you've made to yourself that you didn't keep. You said you would start. You said you would be consistent. You said this time would be different. And then you didn't follow through. Not because you're incapable, but because you didn't hold yourself accountable. And that breaks trust. So the next time you set a goal, a part of you doubts it. A part of you remembers the times you didn't show up. That's why forcing yourself to improve is not just about actions. It's about rebuilding that trust. It's about proving to yourself again and again that when you say something, you mean it. Start small. Do what you said you would do today, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's inconvenient, even if no one else knows, because you will know. And every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen something inside you. You start to believe, I am someone who follows through. And once that belief takes hold, everything changes. You stop needing external motivation. You stop relying on inspiration, because your identity becomes your driving force. You don't work hard because you feel like it. You work hard because that's who you are now. And when your actions align with that identity, consistently improvement is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you embody. But there's another level to this, and this is where most people never go. It's one thing to push yourself when everything is under control. It's one thing to stay disciplined when life is predictable. But real growth begins when things fall apart, when your routine breaks, when your energy is low, when life throws pressure, stress, and uncertainty at you all at once. That's when your true standard is revealed. Because anyone can be focused when it's convenient. Anyone can stay consistent when nothing is going wrong. But the moment life becomes difficult, most people revert back to old habits. They lose structure. They lose discipline. They tell themselves, I'll get back on track later. And later becomes never. If you truly want to force yourself to improve, you have to learn how to operate in chaos, not just in comfort. You have to become the kind of person who doesn't break when things get hard, but adapts. Think about it. Your environment will never be perfect. There will always be distractions. There will always be unexpected problems. There will always be days when you don't feel your best. So if your growth depends on perfect conditions, your growth will always be limited. But if you can train yourself to show up regardless of the circumstances, you become unstoppable. That's a different level of discipline. That's saying, no matter what happens, I still move forward, even if it's not perfect, even if it's slower than usual, even if all you can give is 50% instead of 100%. Because consistency is not about perfection, it's about persistence. And sometimes forcing yourself to improve means adjusting your expectations without lowering your standards. It means recognizing that on hard days, progress might look different, but it still counts. Maybe you don't complete everything you planned, but you do something. Maybe you don't feel focused, but you still try. Maybe you're tired, but you refuse to quit completely. That mindset is powerful because it removes the all or nothing thinking that destroys progress. It replaces it with resilience, with flexibility, with determination. And over time, that builds a version of you that can handle anything. You're no longer fragile. You're no longer dependent on motivation or perfect conditions. You become stable, grounded, disciplined in a way that doesn't break under pressure. And once you reach that point, something incredible happens. Challenges stop feeling like threats. They start feeling like opportunities to prove your strength. Because, no matter what comes your way, you've trained yourself to keep going. And that's a level of confidence that nothing can take away. There comes a point where you realize something powerful. No one is coming to push you. No one is coming to wake you up every morning and demand that you chase your potential. No one is going to force you to do the hard things, to stay consistent, to push through resistance. That responsibility is yours. And that can feel heavy at first, because it means you can't blame circumstances. You can't wait for the perfect moment. You can't rely on someone else to create your discipline. But at the same time, it's freeing, Because the moment you accept that everything is on you, you take back control. You stop waiting. You stop hesitating. You stop looking for permission, and you start acting. Think about how many people spend their lives waiting for something external to change, waiting for motivation, waiting for opportunities, waiting for someone to believe in them first. But the truth is, no one believes in you until you show them something to believe in. And that starts with how you show up when no one is watching, when there's no applause, no recognition, no immediate reward, just you and your standard. That's the real test. Because forcing yourself to improve is not about proving something to the world. It's about proving something to yourself. It's about looking at your own reflection and knowing that you didn't take the easy way out, that you didn't settle, that you didn't give up when it would have been easier to quit. And that kind of self-respect, you can't fake it. You earn it through action, through discipline, through consistency over time. And once you earn it, it changes how you carry yourself. You walk differently. You think differently. You approach challenges with a different mindset. Because you know something most people don't. You know that you can rely on yourself. That when things get hard, you don't collapse, you respond. That when doubt shows up, you don't listen. You act. And that's where real confidence comes from. Not from words. Not from affirmations. But from evidence. Evidence that you have created through your own behavior. So if you're waiting for someone to push you, stop. If you're waiting for the perfect moment, it's not coming. If you're waiting until you feel ready, you'll be waiting forever. This is the moment, not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Decide that you are done being controlled by comfort. Decide that you are done negotiating with excuses. Decide that from this point forward, you take ownership of your growth. Because once you truly take ownership, everything changes. You stop hoping for a better life, and you start building it. And now, this is where everything comes together. Because at the end of the day, forcing yourself to improve is not about a single decision. It's about a way of living. It's about who you choose to be when the moment gets hard, when no one is watching, when there's no reward waiting for you. That's where your real life is built. Not in the big moments, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet choices you make every single day. And here's the truth most people avoid. The life you want is already available to you. The discipline, the focus, the consistency, it's not something you have to find. It's something you have to choose over and over again. Because every day you're faced with the same decision. Stay the same or grow. Choose comfort or choose progress. Listen to excuses or act with purpose. And those decisions, repeated daily, become your identity. That's how transformation happens. Not in one breakthrough, not in one moment of motivation, but in hundreds of small choices that no one sees but you. And one day, those choices catch up to you. You wake up stronger, more focused, more disciplined. You handle challenges differently. You think differently. You respond differently, not because something magical happened, but because you change. You forced yourself to become someone who doesn't quit, someone who doesn't wait, someone who doesn't rely on feelings to take action. And that version of you, that's the version that creates results. That's the version that builds the life you once thought was impossible. But here's the final part, the part that matters most. This doesn't end here. There is no finish line where you suddenly stop improving. There is no point where you say, I've done enough, because growth is a lifelong commitment. There will always be another level, another challenge, another version of you waiting to be built. And that's not something to fear, that's something to embrace. Because it means you're never stuck. It means you're never limited by who you are today. It means you always have the ability to become more. So from this moment forward, stop waiting, stop doubting, stop holding back. You already know what you need to do. The only question left is, will you do it? Will you choose discipline when it's hard? Will you act when you don't feel like it? Will you push forward when everything inside you tells you to stop? Because if you will, then there's no limit to where your life can go. And if you won't, nothing changes. The choice is yours. Always has been.